Hello and welcome to Introduction to Emergency Management. I'm your instructor, Sean McKay. So, what is emergency management? Emergency management basically is a function. It's charged with creating a framework for communities, and we want to reduce vulnerability and hazards that happen with disasters and emergencies. So, basically, it's a process that we're going to be doing. So, it refers to activities associated and to avoid in responding to natural and human caused hazards. Basically, we want to do the best that we can to deal with any type of emergency that we have. It's not haphazard. It's a set of rules and different things that we have set in place that allow us to respond to emergencies in a certain manner over and over again, and allows us to scale things up and down depending on the emergency, and allows us to prepare and respond to different emergencies and then recover from them. Emergency management, so as a vision, we want to promote safer and less vulnerable communities. We want to make sure that people are safe. We want to make sure that our communities are safe. We want to be able that we can cope with hazards and disasters. It's a managerial function, again, charged with creating a framework which communities reduce vulnerability to hazards. So emergency management is a process that we use to take care of emergencies and different things that happen within our community. Process of evaluating of all hazards approach is basically a process of evaluating, basically looking at what happens or what could possibly happen in our area or our facility, and then preparing for it, and then building plans for those different events. So whether it's flooding, whether it's unrest, whether it's mass shootings, or whether it's a hazardous material event, these are all types of things that we have to think about as far as all hazards approach. And again, it takes care of everything. One of the things that, before 9/11, nobody thought of that they could use an airplane to run into a building. All we knew of airplane hijackings, what they were take over a plane and then ask for something, with their demands. Nobody had a clue that they use it as a suicide weapon. So in an all hazards approach, it's basically thinking about outside the box and thinking anything that could happen to your facility and or your community, and then planning for it. We have to prepare, we have to train, and this allows us to respond to one or more different events. You're not going to be able to prepare for every single event. However, if you prepare enough and well enough and train enough for certain events, you'll be able to respond to almost any event that happens to you. So basically, we want to consider all our accounts, as I said before. You want to deal with all the various phases of our response. We want to deal with all our stakeholders, and deal with all the impacts that are relevant to disasters. And again, whether that's tornadoes, whether that's flooding, and so on and so forth. So the National Incident Management System, it's designed as a function for management. NIMS is based on the Incident Command System. ICS, or Incident Command System, is scalable to any size event, whether we're running a car accident to whether we're running a full-blown disaster with flooding across several states, or something like the Event Horizon that was in the Gulf. ICS can be scaled with all those types of events. And again, it allows for a coordinated and unified response to any event. So basically, we can have several different agencies come together and work together in one event, and we can command all those people below us. It was established in 1970 by California Fire Service, and it meant to bring together responses in fires in California and Arizona. The fires were large. They had no type of command system other than what they were using at the time, and they designed this system to allow a large response to large fires. Again, it's a standardized approach to command, control, and coordinated emergency responses, and it provides for common hierarchy. So we have, no matter what response we have the same types of people in the same types of positions, and the same types of positions that need to be filled. What's the mission in emergency management? Again, we want to protect our community. We want to coordinate and integrate our activities. We want to sustain and build sustainment. We want to improve our capability to mitigate. We want to prepare and respond. We want to take care of everything and anything that can happen to us in the world and deal with it. So that's what the mission of emergency management is. We want to take care of all the hazards that happen to us. We want to prepare our people. We want to train our people. This is what emergency management is all about. So what are the phases of emergency management? Well, first off, we have mitigation. We've got preparation. We've got response. And then, of course, lastly, we have recovery. However, that said, we look at what the process is. And in this case, we look at it and sees that one builds upon the other. However, we must realize that all these phases could be going on at the same time, depending on what's going on. You could be building mitigation processes and preparing for a response while recovering from another response, and then responding to another event on top of it all. Basically, this is a quick synopsis of what it looks like. Here on the left, you see the mitigation and everything going on, the recovery. An incident occurs. You get a big spike of activity in the emergency response, and then you got emergency response dropping off and the recovery activity going on, and then returning to your pre-incident operations. A better view of it, as we can see here, is ongoing development or disaster alert. Whether this is days or events, or we may not have we may not actually have an alert in anything. In this case, we're talking about a forecast or a warning, such as a hurricane or a bad storm. Event happens, and you see this spike of our emergency response. You get your search and rescue, and your initial rapid assessment starts of damages, and then that dies off real quickly and goes back to normal. However, in that same aspect, we'll see emergency relief going on and that fading off. But in the same aspect, what's growing here is rehabilitation, ongoing development, and reconstruction. So while one spikes and dies off, the other one's going to build and go on. Now, this may take days, months, or even years. We see events such as large fires, as forest fires and things whatnot, where they're still recovering. We're still recovering from Katrina, you know, decades on from that event. And it's an event that, or a process that just goes on and on and on and continues. So what is mitigation? It entails the identifying risks and hazards and that must be sustainably reduced or eliminated to change the impact. So this may be building things such as dams or levees or other works and things that are going to change the outcome of an event. Again, they're long term, their sustained effect may have an impact on insurance premiums. So these are things that are not built overnight, these are built over time, they're planned for, and then they take time to take on. So as I was talking about a minute ago, how things could go on at the same time. You could be building these mitigation processes and still respond to events and other things going on. Good. So we're talking about building codes, maybe zoning rules that restrict floodplains, rebuilding damaged structures with more resilient materials, flood maps that identify low-lying areas and then not allowing people to build in those areas, and then maybe relocating people and homes out of floodplains and flood-prone areas. And a minute ago, I just talked about dams and levees that help prevent flooding. So just a little process here. We're looking at areas that talk about hazardous mitigation. So preparedness. Again, this is different than mitigation. Mitigation is a long-term thing that's done to change the outcome of an event that happens. Preparedness means that you are preparing for an event. You are training for it. You are getting equipment for it. You are having drills. You are building plans that prepare the personnel and your community and your facility for an event. Again, we talk about training, talk about planning. You want to get your resources. You want to get your food. You want to get your supplies. Intelligence or surveillance. Again, this is very important, especially we're dealing with events that are talking about unrest and violence. And then, of course, we want to exercise these plans. You can't have a plan without exercising it. You have to have a drill. You have to have um, training. You have to have different things that exercise those things and determine whether those plans are actually working. Again, so preparedness must be in place to deal with events. We got plans for mass casualty events up here in the left-hand corner. We've got firefighting events that people are prepared for through training. And then, of course, down the bottom, we have large-scale mass casualty and dealing with fatalities. So basically, this is what we're looking at, planning for emergency management. So basically on the left hand is the level of the devastation, from small up to catastrophic. And then the frequency of occurrence. So basically what we're looking at is maybe on a daily response, you have small events that happen all the time. But as we're looking at the more damage we're going to have and the increased critical aspect of what's going on um, gets larger depending on the event, growing on the size on the left-hand side. And then, of course, we see that it goes down in the frequency of occurrence on the bottom. So the higher this goes up, the less likely that it's going to happen. However, the bigger impact that it's going to have on your facility and or your community. And preparedness cycle. So let's look at this. We want to plan, we want to organize our equipment, we want to train our people, we want to exercise that, and then we want to evaluate. We got to remember that no matter what we do, we need to exercise it. We need to check it out, make sure that the plan works, and then we need to figure out what to improve, and we need to evaluate those exercises so that again it's a continuous cycle. This never stops, just like the rest of the process never stops. This is not a do one time thing and then you set it on a shelf. So what's response? Again, this is basically compromise all the activities that deal with immediate actions of saving lives, protecting property and the environment. And of course, to meet the basic human needs. Response involves the evacuation or execution of the emergency plans and related actions. And remember, we are responding based on the plan that we have put in place. Again, so we're going to deal with evacuating victims, maybe dealing with life-saving events, retreating victims, uh, deployment of response teams or medical stockpiles, and then establishment of the incident command system or operations. And again, here's what the emergency response cycle looks like. Again, we talk about cycles. This, just like everything else, is a process. And recovery. Recovery, again, as you saw before from that slide a little while ago about how recovery can take a long time. Again, this is dealing with essential services and repair or damage that happened to the event. We had reconstruction of government operations, housing services, replenishment stockpiles, rebuilding different parts of the community and or your facility, and whatnot. So this is a long time process that's going to happen. Again, extend on time. Your first job is to put your responders and your people back into service, replace your damaged equipment, then repair everything that you can, evaluate your response, and evaluate your mitigation actions and projects. Again, We want to evaluate our response. Why do we want to do that? We want to make sure what we planned and what we had in place worked. If it didn't work, we have to figure it out and why it didn't work, and then we have to fix it. Same thing with the evaluation of the mitigation actions and projects. Do we we want to make sure everything works that we put in place? Maybe we built something that dealt with flooding. Maybe we built a project and then figured out, oh my God, it didn't work as we planned because flooding was a lot worse than we thought, or maybe because of the actual design didn't actually work. So we have to evaluate everything that we have in place. Again, it's the final phase of the emergency plan, but it's a process that happens all the time and is ongoing. And you have short-term recovery for your vital services. Long-term recovery for disaster may go on for years until the entire plan is put into place. So the federal government plays a process of emergency management. There are rules and regulations. There are plans put in place that the government has set up for everybody to work with. So on March 30th, 2011, President Barack Obama issued the Presidential Policy Directive 8, which is for national preparedness. It was superseded by the Homeland Security Presidential Directive 8, which was signed by George Bush on December 17, 2003. So PPD establishes that preparedness objectives are to be accomplished and subdivided into emergency management components and integrated in national planning frameworks. Prevention, protection, mitigation, response, and recovery, as we just talked about a moment ago. So here we have the national framework. So we have the national framework of prevention, protection, mitigation, response, and of course, last is the disaster recovery framework. So the focus on the prevention is, again, to prevent things, mainly on preventing imminent terrorist threats. The National Protection Framework assigns roles and responsibilities and coordinates agencies across Homeland Security, border security, transportation, anything and everything among the larger players in the field. And that goes all the way down to the local responder. National Mitigation Framework, again, addresses the capabilities to reduce the loss of life and property. And of course, it is distinct from other frameworks because, again, these take place at a local event and at the local level, and federal government is not as prominent at the other planning frameworks. The National Response Framework basically articulates overreaching emergency management principles used to coordinate and conduct a multi-agency, a multi-jurisdictional program. This basically sets a framework that works all across the government, all the way down to the local responder. Again, it coordinates assigns roles and responsibilities in the recovery in the disaster recovery framework, and is to restore, redevelop, and revitalize the health, social, economic, and environmental aspects of disaster impacted states and jurisdictions. Again, this is a process, this is a framework that gives you a guide to work with. So to recap, we have emergency management, again, as a process that deals with emergencies and disasters. We have 4 phases, which is mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. We want to use the incident command system to respond to any event, whether it's small or large. Is ever evolving system. It's not static. It always evolves. Things are always changing. We have to be cognizant of that, and we have to update our plans, and we have to update our training to deal with our emergency management process. Again, it's backed by the federal law and policy. And again, remember, of most importance, no matter how large an event gets, it's always local. No matter who comes to the door, no matter who responds, the event is always local. It impacts the local community first and then gets responded to by other people to help deal with the event. Well, that's the end of this lecture. I hope you like it, and you guys have a great day, and I will see you in class.